Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
It is that time. It is time for the Breeders' Cup World Thoroughbred Championships. And David Aragona and myself, Gino Buccola, are here. We're going to preview the main event for you. We'll go horse by horse through the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now, we're recording this a few days out. You still have plenty of time to get to DRF.com, shop.drf.com, because we have our Breeders' Cup packages up. You want all the help you can get with the clocker reports, the betting strategies, and everything you need for Friday and for Saturday. So, David, they changed the schedule of the races the last couple of years to make it more of a TV production. So they put the main event, the Breeders' Cup Classic, right in the middle of the races on Saturday. It's going to go as race number 8. That means it'll close out some of the early sequences, like the early pick 5, and then it'll also start a late pick 5 sequence. Let's take a look at the field for the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. And I gotta say, top to bottom, it is as competitive and fun of a betting race that I can remember. It is a full field, and you have horses from all over the world with legitimate claims to the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, they could have made this race 1 on Saturday, and it would still be the feature race of the day. This classic just has everything. I mean, there are horses that are top 3-year-olds running fast speed figures for their generation coming in here. Some really nice older horses that'll be challenging those. And then you've got the international contenders, 3 runners from Japan, and of course, the morning line favorite, City of Troy, who has looked like something special in Europe this year. We'll see if he can translate that form to the dirt.
And as we take a look at the Timeform US pace projector, what's really interesting about this is City of Troy, who's done all of his work overseas, he's not up on the pace projector, and he's done all of his work on the grass. So for a horse who has been forward in a lot of his races, kind of expecting him to want to go forward in here, but he just kind of throws a monkey wrench into everything from a pace standpoint, just not exactly knowing where he's going to stack up compared to these really fast dirt horses.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Ryan Moore places City of Troy in the early stages of this race. He is a horse that has raced prominently in Europe, actually went basically gate to wire in his most recent victory, the Jump on International, but he's also shown the ability to rally from further off the pace as he did in the Epsom Derby. So I think he's got some versatility of running style. I think the big question, if he's coming from off the pace, is how does he handle that dirt kickback that he's never felt before?
No surprise to see horses like Fierceness and Arthur's Ride up towards the top. Very quick horses who have shown the ability to sustain that speed to longer distances here. And as we get to the field, David, 11 grade 1 winners in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. It is as good of a renewal as I can remember. And even in a busy week with all the work, Bobby, our producer, he's going to remain forever young, David. I know he's a big fan of this one right here. And this horse is very, very talented. If we're talking about horses who have some of the higher ceilings in here, to me, like horses like Forever Young and City of Troy, we may not even have really scratched the surface of what they're able to do.
Yeah, it does feel like some of these 3-year-olds are the ones that might still have a little bit of upside heading into this Breeders' Cup Classic. And you could say that about Forever Young, who missed the entire summer by design, took some time off to prepare for this race, got in that prep that we just watched last time in the Japan Dirt Classic, where he beat fellow 3-year-olds, certainly a weaker field that he's going to meet here. But I think one positive takeaway from that race is that he drew the rail in a large field that day, and he handled it just fine. Stumbled a bit at the start, but took some kickback, got to the outside, and worked out the trip that I think his jockey wanted. So I think they've got that experience under their belts, breaking from the inside here. Probably not a big negative for Forever Young, who's got such versatility. And we saw what he can do against some of the best 3-year-olds in the country in the Kentucky Derby. Just barely missed that day. I know a lot of people felt he might have been the best horse on the day. We'll see if he can prove it on Saturday.
Yeah, Forever Young and City of Troy kind of look similar when we get to City of Troy in a minute with their overall body of work. Highland Falls perked up last time, David, with his career best effort, winning the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He had been a horse who'd always shown ability, but Flavien Prat tried brand new tactics with him. And we show the replay here in a race where it looked like Arthur's Ride was the lone speed. He really made that horse work the entire time. He was right on his flank. And I want to give Highland Falls a lot of credit for that, but I also want to give Flavien Prat a lot of credit because it was a different tactics that day. He made a choice, and that choice really, really helped Highland Falls get the victory.
Yeah, he's a horse who, as you said, has always had a ton of talent, and he's always looked like this kind of horse who would be best going the mile and a quarter distance. He certainly got that pedigree by Breeders' Cup Classic winner Curlin, out of Breeders' Cup Distaff winner Round Pond. So he's bred to win a race like this, and it just took him a while to sort of reach that full potential. But I think with the more aggressive tactics that you noted last time, we got to see the best version of Highland Falls come out, and I don't think he necessarily has to get the same ride in this race because there were just other faster horses than him. But I think the key takeaway, now that he's getting a rider switch to Luis Saez as Flavian Pratt decides to stick with Sierra Leone instead, is that he can be more forward. He's not a horse that has to come from towards the back of the pack, which I think was a mistake that was made in the Santa Anita Handicap earlier this year. So I expect to see him in the mix early, probably in the second flight. And I know he's going to get the trip. I think he's going to be charging hard on the stretch.
The number 3, City of Troy, 6 for 7 overall, just one defeat. And that defeat came in his first start of the year this year off a long layoff. Hadn't raced in about 7 months or so. For him, we have a couple questions to ask. Will he take to the surface? Will he take to the, American US style of racing where they may go a little bit quicker early on? Sometimes horses just have different styles. But from ability standpoint, this multiple Group 1 winner, I mean, he's as good as they come with what he's seen. It's just, can he transfer it over to something that's a lot different and something we have never seen from him?
Yeah, I think that you're asking a lot of this horse to come over and face a field as strong as this. I know there's this narrative out there that City of Troy just has to come over and run his good turf race on the dirt and he'll beat this field. I don't take that for granted. This is a pretty strong classic field. It's got a lot of depth to it. Maybe he doesn't have a star like Flightline, but there are some really nice dirt horses in this race. And I think City of Troy is going to have to handle the dirt really well if he's going to win here. Make no mistake about it. He's got talent. I think we saw that last time, the Jump International, when he finally delivered that performance that Aidan O'Brien had sort of been promising all year, setting the pace, turning away at the challenge of a really nice horse in Calandigan in the stretch and winning, going a similar distance to this. But now he's probably has to deal with some kickback, breaking from the inside. He's got to run that race back on a completely different surface on a different part of the globe. There are a lot of questions to answer at what's going to be a short price. I don't anticipate it's going to be as low as 5-2, but still, even 7-2, 4-1 is a little short for me.
As we move to Mixto, make sure to for all of you to subscribe to the YouTube channel below. I saw Dan Immelman and Mike Beer out at the track yesterday with Lucia recording videos. They are going to be all set to give you previews of all of these big Breeders' Cup races over the weekend. So David, Mixto got his big win in the Pacific Classic most recently, but that was a very soft renewal of the Pacific Classic. In the 2 weeks leading up, I think 2 or 3 of the horses that would have probably been your top 2 or 3 betting choices were removed from the race. And so it ended up being a more wide open group. And we can't take away from Mixto. That was a career best effort, and he did win that race. But now he's going to have to come in off a bit of a layoff, and he's going to have to face a much tougher group than he faced last time.
Yeah, I don't want to be too hard on him. He's a horse that's a really hard trier, and I've been a fan of his in the past. It just feels like that was his day. That was the day to have him at 22-1 in the Pacific Classic against a much weaker field than this. He's going to be in tough on Saturday.
Senor Buscador had a really, really nice start to 2024 earlier on this year in the Pegasus World Cup. He was the runner-up, and he came back in the Saudi Cup, and he won that one. He was third in the Dubai World Cup. Those 3 races, excellent, excellent performances from him. Then after a layoff, he's come back, and he was set up to have a couple races leading him into the Breeders' Cup Classic. So this is what the connections hoped. They probably just hoped that he'd shown a little bit more on the track. Maybe they weren't expecting to win those races, right? Going 7 furlongs and then in the California Crown. But I bet they would have liked to be a little bit more competitive last out in that California Crown race.
Yeah, and I think we saw the best version of Senor Buscador come out in that Saudi Cup where he got to go the one turn 9 furlongs. And he probably is that horse that wants to go 8 to 9 furlongs. That's his best distance, typically because you get a little more pace to close into with some more speed horses going distances like that. And the pace completely fell apart in the Saudi Cup, was able to just nip Ushba Tesoro at the wire that day. Since then, his performances have been okay, but not quite up to that level. His Dubai World Cup, I thought he ran fine going this distance. That was the race that kind of fell apart behind the much the best winner, Laurel River. But as you noted, just has kind of tailed off a little bit since returning this fall. And I think he's going to have to run a lot better to be competitive in this spot.
Derma Sotogake will put the blinkers on. He was second in last year's Breeders' Cup Classic at 26-1 behind White Abario. But since that race, we just really haven't seen him competitive in the next three. He was fine in the Saudi Cup where he was only beaten a couple lengths that day, but then in the Dubai World Cup, and then in his first start back off the bench, he was just not close at all. He was well behind Ushba Tesoro, who he'll face in this race along with others. So he is coming into this race not in the best of form.
Yeah, his last couple of performances have been on the dull side. The Dubai World Cup, he was another one that was just run off his feet by Laurel River. Really had nothing to offer late, and especially his prep race in Japan. I know it was just a stepping stone, but he got a pretty good trip that day, chasing a pace that held together and just went backwards from there. His connections have kind of alluded to the fact that even they feel like he's getting a little too smart for his own good. They feel like he doesn't put forth the full effort, and I think he's going to have to put forth his very best effort on Saturday to beat this field.
Ushba Tesoro, another one of the Japanese runners. This horse has been second in all three starts so far this year, and that was coming off of the fifth in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, and following that was a Group 1 winner. So this is a horse who's actually in pretty nice form right now, and was only 7-2 in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, took a lot of money, was a major player that day. How do you think he fits with this group this year?
Yeah, Ushba Tesoro feels like a horse that could slip through the cracks a little bit in this race. He's not generating a whole lot of buzz coming in here, but he's run nothing but strong races at the highest level over the past couple of seasons. His Breeders' Cup Classic last year, probably the worst performance that we've seen during that stretch, because the pace was coming apart a bit at the end and he kind of flattened out in the late stages of that race, but came right back to photo with Senor Buscador in the Saudi Cup earlier this year. He's arguably better than that one, going the 1.25 mile distance. And then his prep race, I thought, was solid in Japan. Like I said, the pace held together. He ran right by Derma Sotogake in the stretch and looked like he got what he needed out of it. Won't be surprised when he takes a step forward here.
Completely agree with you. You're just not hearing a lot of people talk about this horse, and he feels like one who might fall through the cracks. Could be a really fun pick 4 or pick 5 horse to throw into some of your tickets if you're looking for value in a really competitive race. Pyrenees has been excellent this year. Have to give it up to Cherie DeVoe. She's done a fantastic job with this runner, who's been no worse than second in the 5 tries. He's been in the exacta in all of them, multiple Group 1 placed, but will need to continue to improve. And he has done that. He's basically improved on the buyer scale in like each of his races over his last 5 or 6, but he's going to have to take another pretty big step up in here, because if he's behind Highland Falls and Highland Falls handled him pretty easily, Highland Falls is kind of one of the least of his worries in this race among some other really top contenders. So I respect everything he's done, but this is definitely like a leveling up moment for him.
Yeah, it wasn't just that he was beaten by Highland Falls last time. He was really no match for that foe in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. I thought got a very good trip in that race, saving ground early on a track that maybe you wanted to be more inside as opposed to outside. So maybe we saw his very best effort that day, and I just don't think it's good enough to be competitive against this field.
Fierceness proved a lot of folks wrong in his last couple races. First, he showed us that he can win back-to-back races. He can put 2 together. He also showed us that he has no problem getting a 1.25 miles under the right circumstances. He did last time. He earned a 111 buyer speed figure in the Travers. I believe, David, this is the top buyer speed figure for anyone this year, along with Arthur's Ride. And I think Fierceness has 2 of the 3, or the 2 top speed figures, a 110 and a 111. A couple other horses have run that fast, but he holds off Torpedo Anna here, and I've knocked him. I've tried to beat him a few times this year, and he's made me look a little silly in doing so, but he puts himself in the race. He keeps getting better. He's really honest. That tactical style, that running style that he has, where he's fast, but he can sit and he can finish, and that just keeps him in so many races.
Yeah, he's a horse that I, too, have been wrong about earlier in the year, particularly in the Jim Dandy and the Travers, when I thought after the Kentucky Derby he had maybe been exposed as a horse that could not stand up to a real challenge. He proved that was not the case in the Travers. He got a good trip that day, but he fended off Torpedo Anna when she was really firing at him in the late stages, and as you said, ran the highest buyer speed figure of anybody coming into this race. So he certainly has the credentials to win this classic. From a pure talent standpoint, he might be the best horse in this race, certainly the best dirt horse on paper. The question with him is how fast the pace is going to be in here. I'm sure the connections were happy that he drew towards the outside, maybe not thrilled that he drew inside of Arthur's Ride, who looks like the horse that kind of is committed to sending to the front end here. So he might have to take a little kickback angle outside of a horse, not something he had to do in either the Jim Dandy or the Travers when he drew the far outside post position each time. And also those are races that featured much more moderate paces. So I think it remains to be seen how quickly they go. I won't be surprised when this is a pretty fast pace in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and I'm not sure that that suits Fierceness ideally.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think this bigger field where there's just a lot more pace, is he going to be getting caught in between in some traffic? We've seen him work out those good trips in those smaller fields, so we can't take that away from him, but circumstances and pricing here, very, very interesting to talk about Fierceness and which Fierceness may show up. How about Tapit Trice? Which Tapit Trice will show up in here? He was a really good version of Tapit Trice in the Woodward last time out, and he's been pretty good so far this year. It seemed like some of the antics that he had last year, where he was kind of his own worst enemy, maybe a little bit immature as a 3-year-old. He does seem like he has matured a bit as a 4-year-old, and not quite that same where he needs to be definitely on the outside or he has to be ridden a certain way. And pattern-wise, he may have just ran a really big one in his first start off the bench, maybe regressed a little bit and come back to it. I don't know if he's good enough to win this race, David, but he was certainly a horse last year at 3 that had a lot of upside and that we were thinking about as a horse who could be a very good older horse in races just like this down the line. Do you think he fits it all in here?
The Woodward was positive in the sense that he overcame his own antics to win the race, something he hadn't always done earlier in his career, but he did so beating Skippy Longstocking, who I think a lot of people wouldn't exactly consider a contender in this race if they had opted for this spot instead of the dirt mile. And he just has to take that step forward that we haven't seen from him yet. His race off the bench in the Monmouth Cup was good, but he took advantage of Highland Falls not getting a particularly good rider trip that day. And if you watch that replay back, it's easy to make the case that Highland Falls maybe should have won that race, even though he lost by 5 lengths. And Highland Falls, unsurprisingly, turned the tables next time in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, where I thought Tapit Trice was just pretty disappointing.
Yep.
He's got to show up against top competition, which we haven't seen him do yet this year.
Sierra Leone's interesting because when you hear the sort of discussion around him a lot of the times, you feel like you're going to look down at his past performances and see a horse who's just never close, well beaten all the time, but he's improved on the speed figures every single time. And in his entire career, he's never been beaten more than a length and a half, length and 3/4, like not even 2 lengths when it's all said and done. So it is funny that he gets sort of discussed like a horse who hasn't ever really won a big one. And he does have a couple big ones, and he really is only 0 for his last 4. And in this race, David, it just feels like a big field with a lot of horses who want to be forward. I don't know if he gets the right type of trip or if he's good enough to win, but I sure feel like he should be passing a lot of horses in here and get a really nice trip and have every opportunity to give a good account of himself.
Yeah, I agree with your take on the narrative around this horse. You feel like you're supposed to look down at his PPs and see 1 win in 10 seconds, and that's not the case. I mean, he's won almost half of his starts. He's right there at the end. He runs well every time, and he's been on this consistent upward trajectory with his speed figures. Yes, he hasn't won the biggest races over the summer, and he narrowly lost the Kentucky Derby, but he ran just as well as Forever Young that day. And since then, I mean, you could argue that in both the Jim Dandy and the Travers, Fierceness got a better trip than he did because the paces were on the moderate side, which suit Fierceness's running style, and Sierra Leone had to close into those paces. And I think it's a credit to him that Flavien Prat was actually able to keep him a little closer to the pace than we're accustomed to seeing him in the Travers. Maybe that took away from his finish a little bit, but I think he's going to get a much more beneficial pace setup in this race. And I don't know if he's going to be the 12-1 that he is in the morning line, because I do think this horse still has a bit of a following, and there are certainly things to like about him, but he's definitely not going to be the favorite in this race, and he's got credentials to win.
Arthur's Ride will have a big say in this race. He may not win it, but he is a horse who's really fast, David, and he is capable of brilliant efforts. We saw from him in the Whitney when he threw up a 110 Beyer speed figure. We saw from him in a non-winners of 2 race prior to that when he threw up a 111 Beyer speed figure. When he gets the lead and he can clear, he is really, really tough sometimes. I just wonder if he's going to be able to do that in this field with a couple others who have some really, really good natural early speed.
Yeah, that's my concern as well. Those 2 gigantic speed figures were earned when he was completely isolated on the front end, really never taking a challenge or even seeing another horse in the race. I don't know if that's going to happen here. He's got a crossover in front of Fierceness, potentially deal with other speed in this race. And we saw what happened last time when Highland Falls and Flavien Prat applied that pressure in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. The pace wasn't even that fast, but just having another horse alongside him, it seemed to cause Arthur's Ride to come undone, and he couldn't even finish off that race. So I'm a little bit concerned that this horse can stand up to a challenge. But as you noted, if the trip works out for him, the talent is certainly there.
Newgate adds the blinkers. He's coming off a third place finish in the California Crown, which was actually, based on speed figures, his career best effort. And it was a good effort. And if you watch him in the morning, he's been training pretty well. Like, he is in good form and in good spirits right now. And I want to like this horse a little bit, David. I think I'm going to throw him into the bottom of some of the exotics. I just don't know if he's quite good enough to compete with some of the top horses. He's going to be drawn way to the outside, and with his running style, he could get parked a little bit because I don't think he wants to be on the lead, but he doesn't want to be taken way, way back. So he's kind of in between with his running style. Do you give him any bit of a long shot chance in here?
Yeah, it sounds like we were thinking along similar lines with Newgate. I considered throwing him in maybe for my fourth or fifth pick because he is a horse who's training very well coming in here. You watch some of those recent workout videos and you can see that he's just thriving right now. The problem is I look down at his past performances and I'm just trying to find the race in his PPs that makes me want to bet him here or convinces me that he's quite good enough to win here. Maybe he moves forward a little bit off the prep last time in the California Crown, but he kind of hung at the end of that race. I imagine that's why Bob Baffert's putting the blinkers on right now, just to give him that little bit of focus that he needed last time to seal the deal. But this is a much tougher spot.
The tone in both of our voices was so funny when we started to talk about him because we wanted to. We're trying to build a case for him somewhat, maybe at least a horse to use in the bottom of your exotics, or if you're in a really big spread race here, then one to throw in. Next, David, is the very, very sharp marathoner who finally will take a chance against the top of the division. And we've seen this horse throw up very big buyer speed figures, but we will always have to wonder, in those races, he was able to work out his own trip, sit off of pretty slow early paces. And now when he faces tougher and faster, he may not be able to do that. So the trip he's going to get in here will probably be a lot different than ones that we've seen him in, 4, 5, 6 of his races in a row. How good is he, and can he compete with this group?
I'm a huge fan of this horse. I mean, I just think he's a really cool horse to watch run, being a specialist in these marathon races, the way he's able to sprint home in these dirt marathons, something we don't often see. I just wonder if the attributes that he uses to win those races are going to be applicable to this Breeders' Cup Classic, because his big asset is that he can kind of shut off for a mile and just kind of gallop for these 13-second furlongs and then actually quicken the pace to finish up over the final half mile. If he runs that kind of race here, he's going to be closing from 9th or 10th early, and that's an unfamiliar trip for next. I think the connections had to be pleased, at least, that he drew far outside of other speed in this race, so he's not going to have to deal with some cavalry charge of horses coming over on him, but we don't know if he can work out the kind of trip that I think he's likely to get in this race and be successful. And with all of those blowout victories on his card, I don't think he's going to be some massive price in here. So I had trouble warming up to him, but as a fan of Next, I won't be displeased if he does well here.
Yeah, I'm very glad they took a shot in here, and I hope that he runs well. But the same thing that you're doing, I'm trying to picture the trip he gets. And if he's sitting as close as he normally sits, he's going to be going too fast. He's probably just not going to have enough finish because he's not used to going that fast. If he's 5, 6 lengths behind, is that going to be something that he can deal with when he just hasn't dealt with that recently? He's always been right there. So very happy to see this group in the Breeders' Cup Classic. 11 Grade 1 winners lining up. David, let's take a look when it's all said and done. Where are you going to land with your selections?
I put the number 2, Highland Falls, on top. I'll be upfront. I don't anticipate that he's going to be anywhere near 20-1. I think he's probably more of a 10-1 shot in this race, but I think that's more than fair value on him because I think his Jockey Club Gold Cup was among the best recent preps that any of these horses have run. He's drawn well inside. The Brad Cox part, if you haven't been paying attention, has just been winning seemingly every graded stakes they run anywhere in the country recently. And you're going to get a decent price on him and Godolphin for a horse that seems to be on an upward trajectory. So I put him on top, but I think Sierra Leone's going to run well. And I certainly respect the horse that you put on top, Forever Young.
Yeah, I thought just Forever Young and City of Troy, they may be the horses with the highest ceilings. These horses that if everybody showed up and ran their A game and their best on that surface, those two horses might have the highest upside. So I went there and put the possibly value of Forever Young on top. Sierra Leone, you and I both have in the mix as a horse who we just respect that they're going to be passing a lot of horses late, maybe a little under the radar. And then I threw in a big price of Tapit Trice for the bottom of the exotics. In that same sense, at least this horse can be passing a lot of horses late and could spice up some of the exotics there. So 1, 3, 11, 10 for me, 2, 11, 1, 7 for David. So Bobby, for you, I'm staying Forever Young. David's going to Highland Falls. Whoever you're playing in the Breeders' Cup Classic, we wish you the best of luck.
Hey, let me give you a hot tip. If you liked the content that you've seen before, click on the like and subscribe button right here. And of course, for more DRF videos like Race of the Days, stakes previews, click on the videos right here.